6 iPads, 6 keyboards, 2 pencils, and a whole bunch of extras. All add up to make buying an iPad actually really confusing and also potentially very expensive. So hopefully I can help, and let me know in the comments if you have any questions. I'll leave links in the description below if you want to check these out. And if you do enjoy the video, fingers crossed, then a cheeky like and subscribe would be lovely. Okay, so right off the bat, before we dive into each one individually, there are 5 things that you need to know. Number 1, near enough every app that you can download from the App Store will run on any iPad. You can watch the same streaming apps, play the same games, use the same productivity tools, and they all support the Apple Pencil, whether it's the 1st or the 2nd gen, and they also all support center stage with the front selfie camera. Now, of course, performance will vary. Higher-end iPads are faster, and in a handful of cases, like the upcoming release of DaVinci Resolve, or if you want to use Apple's new Stage Manager feature, you'll need an iPad with an M1 or an M2 chip to run it. But 99% of the time, any app will run on any iPad. Number 2, and this is the big question really, what are you going to be using it for? Keep that in mind as I walk you through the different models, and we'll come back to this at the end. Number 3, and maybe the best iPad isn't actually one of these. It's definitely worth checking out older or refurbished models as well, because specifically with the new iPad 10th gen, which I reviewed the other day, and you can click at the top right if you want to watch that, and I'll leave a link at the end, I still maintain that the older 4th gen iPad Air is actually a better bet than this, and in some cases, cheaper. However, the flip side of that argument is that these iPads will last you a good 5 years. They last a long time, so it's worth buying the best one you can now, so you can wait a little bit longer to upgrade in the future. Number 4, the extras. This can jack up the price of any iPad, but it can also turn them into almost laptop replacements. Number 5, and if we're being honest, no one really needs an iPad. You need your phone, you need your laptop, but iPads are nice in-betweeners. And for my money, they are the best tablets you can buy, although there are other options. You've got the Samsung Galaxy Tab S8 Plus if you want a premium Android tablet. At the other end of the spectrum, a really cheap and cheerful Amazon Fire tablet is great for kids or just basic tablet-y tasks. Or if you want to run proper desktop programs and want the more hybrid laptop/tablet experience, definitely have a look at the new Microsoft Surface Pro 9, which is actually considerably cheaper than the new iPad Pro 12.9, especially when you're out on the keyboard. And if you don't already have a laptop and you're kind of weighing up, should I get an iPad or a laptop? Honestly, my money would be on the laptop. I would get either an M1 or M2 Air. Having said all that, the iPad does offer a unique combination of a big touchscreen, long battery life, great apps and cameras, a great range of accessories, and of course the incredibly slick iPadOS 16 software, all in a beautifully crafted thin and light form factor. Do I need one? No, but do I love using it? Absolutely. And obviously, while this can be a little confusing, the benefit of having 6 different new iPads to choose from is hopefully there is something to meet your needs and your budget. So what are the differences between them, and which should you go for? Well, if you go onto Apple's website, there's a really handy table showing the different features and specs, and there's also a comparison tool, and this is a really simple way to see what you get with each iPad. But you've not come here for me to tell you to go to a website and do your own research. You want to hear what I think, I hope. So let's start with this guy, the cheapest one, the iPad 9th generation. Pros and cons. Well, Pro, it's by far the cheapest iPad, and as I say, it still runs all the same apps despite the slightly slower A13 processor. Lots of people also prefer having a physical home button that they can press. It's also the only iPad with a headphone jack, which could be a big deal. The 64 gigs of storage is fine, and it's also the same as you get on the Air, which actually costs twice as much. It also supports the 1st gen Apple Pencil, and I think for kids, for schools, even for the elderly, this is still a perfectly good iPad. Downsides. Well, it does look a bit like a dinosaur compared to the other ones. It's the only one with this older, somewhat dated design with these chunky bezels and this physical home touch ID button. By the way, you don't actually have to use that. This does still support all the gestures that you get on the other iPads, but it gives you another option. This is also the only iPad without stereo speakers, so the sound is very one-sided. Also, the screen isn't laminated, so there's a very slight gap between the glass and the screen itself, which I don't think by itself is a real deal breaker. The cameras, particularly the one on the back, aren't very good, and also the A13 chip inside here is the oldest of the bunch, although it's still pretty capable. And finally, while the 1st gen Apple Pencil is fine and functionally the same as the Gen 2 in terms of latency and responsiveness, there's no convenient wireless charging or magnetic attachment. But I'll tell you what, I do have a bit of a soft spot for this. It's by far the cheapest and the best value for money if you just want a cheap and cheerful iPad. My little 5-year-old nephew loves to draw on this and play educational games. It's good to have a headphone jack, and if you add on a pencil and a smart keyboard, all in, it's about £600, which as you'll come to see in a minute, is actually quite good value. Okay, let's move on to its younger brother, the brand new 10th generation iPad, which we thought would replace this, but instead Apple have just added a new tier of iPad. So what do you get for your $449 or £499? Well, first you'll have a pretty sharp intake of breath because that's a lot of money for the base iPad. But then we are getting the much more modern and refined design, Touch ID is moved to the power button, and the thinner bezels mean they squeeze in a bigger 10.9-inch screen into a similar overall footprint as the 9th gen. And with the 4 very snazzy new color options, this is a damn good looking tablet. Lightning is out, USB-C is in, so charging and plugging in new accessories is easier. We also get stereo speakers. It's also the only iPad with this new landscape orientation for the selfie camera. Even the refreshed Pros don't have this, and it makes so much more sense that now you're centered in the frame of your video calls. Lots of people asking, why is this the only one to have that landscape orientation? Well, I think the answer is it doesn't support the Apple Pencil 2, and on all the other ones, that's where the magnetic wireless charging strip is that you attach the Pencil to. So because this is still Gen 1 Pencil, there's some room to spare for this camera. So hopefully that's something we see in the other iPads next year. We also get the more powerful A14 chip, which did make a difference to more demanding games, even giving me more graphics options, and it also adds faster Wi-Fi 6, Bluetooth 5.2, and if you go for the mobile option, which I probably wouldn't really recommend on this iPad, you can now get 5G rather than 4G. Apple's also created a bespoke 2-piece Magic Keyboard Folio case exclusively for the 10th gen iPad, which makes it look and feel a lot like a Surface Pro. So yes, this is a relatively big upgrade over the 9th gen iPad, but downsides, well, it's a good deal more expensive and functionally, they basically do the same thing. Also, like this cheaper model, the screen is still not laminated. We only get 1st gen Apple Pencil support, and also the Keyboard Folio, which is a very nifty design. Don't get me wrong, I do like it, but it's £279. It's more than half the price of the bloody iPad itself, which is, frankly, ridiculous. So without spoiling my conclusion too much, right now I think this is the joint hardest iPad to recommend. Holy moly, look at all that Surfshark. As you may have guessed, this video is very kindly sponsored by Surfshark VPN, but first, why use Surfshark? Well, as my plethora of iPads illustrate, it can help you browse the web more safely, it can block ads and malware. Also, one subscription lets you use an unlimited number of devices, and there's an app for pretty much everything. And their unique clean web tool helps keep you safe while browsing. Plus, it's handy to get around region-locked content, especially when I fancy a bit of US Netflix. Best of all though, there is a new November deal where if you enter the code TechChap at the checkout, you can get 85% off and 3 months extra for free, and as always, there's a 30-day money-back guarantee. I genuinely do use Surfshark VPN all the time, so why not give it a try? Okay, moving up the price ladder, next up we have this little guy, the iPad mini Gen 6. And I love this thing. Yes, you have the argument that why buy this if you already have a big iPhone like a Pro Max, and that's fair, but it's still a significantly bigger 8.3-inch screen, and as well as being the lightest iPad, I think this is the perfect size for reading, gaming, carrying around all day, and just being able to use one-handed. And in many ways, it is the little brother of the iPad Air. Not quite the same specs, but we do have a very similar screen that supports a wider P3 color gamut, it's laminated, and also has this anti-reflective coating, which the 9th and 10th gen iPads miss out on. It's also the sharpest screen of any iPad, at 326 pixels per inch, up from the 264 average on the others, although it's a fairly minor point. We also get 2nd gen Apple Pencil support, and also a slight bump in performance with the A15 chip. Downsides? Well, it is smaller, so you're not going to get that big screen tablet iPad experience, and if you are going to use this like a laptop replacement or you're going to do multitasking, it's a bit cramped on this. And particularly also keyboards. Apple doesn't sell a bespoke Magic Keyboard for this because it's just too small. You can get separate Bluetooth keyboards, and ideally you want to use a full-size one because otherwise the keys can be quite cramped. I've also found the battery isn't quite as good as the other iPads. If 10 hours is broadly the average, I'd say I get closer to 9 with the Mini. But put simply, if you want a small tablet, this is the one to get. Then we have the iPad Air, and at £669, it's 100 more than the Mini, and also 170 more than the 10th gen iPad. Now the Air is really interesting because when I made my last iPad buying guide about 6 months ago now, I kind of felt that this didn't really have a place. But actually now, with the refreshed Pros and also the new 10th gen iPad, I think it's come into its own, and actually, I think now this is one of the best options. The biggest upgrade is the M1 chip, and in benchmarks, it's quite a significant step up. In fact, if we compare all 6, of course the M2 in the pros is still faster, particularly in the graphics department, but the M1 represents the most significant upgrade. The M1 also comes with a media engine, so it's much faster for video editing, and which I presume is why only this and also the pros with the M2 will support the new DaVinci Resolve video editor that's coming soon. Similarly, Apple's new Stage Manager feature, which adds a deeper level of multitasking and gives you a slightly more desktop feel to moving and resizing apps, is again only on the M1 and M2. Pair that with a fantastic, albeit very expensive Magic Keyboard, you've got the USB 3.1 port, plus we have Apple Pencil 2. Altogether, the Air becomes a pretty capable productivity hub and almost a laptop replacement. Now, to be honest with you, in regular day-to-day use, you probably wouldn't notice that much difference in speed between the cheapest 9th gen iPad and the Air with that more powerful M1, simply because this is, well, firstly still limited by those kind of slow iPadOS animations, but more importantly, it's also still only 60 Hz. Only the pros get that smoother 120 Hz. And I think overall, there's a lot to like about the Air. There's not a whole lot to complain about, except for being, well, a little bit pricey, accessories are also more expensive, and also, as I say, not really feeling the benefits of the M1 most of the time. Okay, 4 down, 2 to go. Still with me? Let's talk about the iPad Pro 11 and the iPad Pro 12.9. These have just been refreshed as well, although to be honest, it's not a particularly exciting upgrade. We have the M2 chip, which takes the already ludicrously fast M1 and makes it, well, even more ludicrously fast, with a roughly 10% faster processor, 30 to 35% faster graphics, and also a 40% faster neural engine for all that AI wizardry. The Pro models also have more RAM, either 8 or 16 gigs of the stuff, but honestly, I would be impressed if you ever really need this kind of performance, unless you're doing some intense 4K video editing, 3D rendering, or some bespoke medical imaging maybe, or perhaps you just want to max out Genshin Impact, and any kind of frame drop is just not acceptable. So they're faster, and also they're the only iPads to get the new Wi-Fi 6E support, that's 6 GHz spectrum, although of course you will need a 6E router for my American friends to take advantage of that. And also, get ready to be amazed, because with the new Pros, the Apple Pencil can now hover above the screen, which gives you a little preview of where your pencil is or what it's going to do, although only a handful of apps like Pixelmator and a few of Apple's own support it, and also Samsung's had this for what, like 1 billion years now? We also get Bluetooth 5.3 and also Smart HDR4 for the photos, so the camera's a little bit better. It's a pretty underwhelming refresh, but that doesn't take away from the fact that these are still the best and most powerful and most versatile iPads you can buy. Because while the iPad Air is very capable and obviously has the M1 chip, the most noticeable upgrade, going with one of the Pros, is that higher 120Hz ProMotion refresh rate. Every swipe and scroll feels smoother, and games that support 120Hz feel so much faster. And perhaps more importantly, for any keen designer, drawer, or doodler, it makes the pencil feel much more responsive. Design-wise, the Pros are very similar to the Air, although they forego the fun colors in favor of, well, a beefier camera system for a start. We have this ultra-wide lens and also a LiDAR sensor for better augmented reality, although I mostly use it for taking more accurate measurements, and it can also improve focusing in low-light portrait shots. It's a nice extra, but not something you'll use that often. Also, whereas all other iPads use Touch ID, the Pro models get Face ID thanks to the True Depth camera. The Pros also get much better sounding quad speakers, which are genuinely epic. And also the USB-C port has been upgraded to USB 4, so you can actually connect this up to a 6K display, which of course includes Apple's own Pro Display XDR. Now the 11-inch Pro, as it says on the tin, has an 11-inch screen, 0.1 inch bigger than what you get on the Air or the 10th gen iPad. That's not really a big deal. What is a bigger deal is it's a bit brighter, 600 nits of SDR versus 500 nits on the Air. But that's nothing compared to the screen you get on the 12.9-inch Pro. This is bloody gorgeous, and actually it's the same screen basically as you get on a MacBook Pro. Because uniquely to the biggest and of course the most expensive iPad is this mini LED screen, which not only gives us much better contrast, close to OLED levels of inky blacks and rich colors, albeit with a fair amount of blooming in some cases, but you can see, particularly with the black bars around a video or a movie, just look at the difference. But wait, there's more, because the mini LED screen also boosts the brightness to 1000 nits in SDR and a peak of 1600 in HDR. To be honest, I had hoped the mini LED screen of the 12.9 would find its way onto the 11 with this year's refresh, but sadly not. And so I think that leaves the 11-inch Pro in a bit of a weird space. To somewhat mitigate the higher price of these Pros, they do come with 128 gigs of storage as standard. And there's also a whopping 2 terabyte option if you really do have very deep pockets. And then of course you've got the usual 5G Magic Keyboard and pencil options as well. So aside from the size, the mini LED screen, and of course also the price, the Pros are essentially identical. But the question is it worth paying £350 more, which is actually more than the price of the base iPad by itself? Is it worth paying that much more to get the 12.9? Well, in my opinion, if you're gonna go for a Pro model, you may as well go for the proper Pro model. Yes, it's very expensive, but chances are if you are buying one of these, you want that performance, you want that big screen size, and perhaps it is going to be a laptop replacement for you, so the bigger screen size not only makes multitasking and Stage Manager easier to use, but also the bigger Magic Keyboard is a little bit more comfortable as well. And also, once you go mini LED, it's kind of hard to go back. Downsides of the Pros? Well, they are eye-wateringly expensive. It's also a case of diminishing returns with their M2 chip. Yes, it's more powerful, but you're not really going to see it very often. There's also just a lot of stuff that you probably don't need. I mean, hover pen, Wi-Fi 6E, very few people have 6E routers. How often are you going to use the ultra-wide lens? And also remember, the fantastic M2 MacBook Air is the same price as the Pro 12.9, and that's before you add the expensive Magic Keyboard, which actually combined also makes it heavier than the MacBook. And breathe. Let's wrap up. Let me tell you which I think is the best iPad. And straight away, out of the 6, I think there's only really 3 that you should consider. And that is the base 9th gen iPad, iPad Air 5th gen, the 12.9. I think these 3 are the best options. Although of course if you do want a small iPad, get the mini. But actually, and I mentioned this at the beginning, but I reckon the best option is to get the previous generation iPad and hopefully save some money. In most respects, the older 4th gen iPad Air is still better than the new 10th gen iPad, so an older Air or Pro could be a great option unless you can make use of Apple's pretty decent trade-in scheme, and maybe also if you're eligible for one of their discounts, like you're a student or a teacher. But if I had to pick one of these, I reckon the best option is the iPad Air. Yes, it's a little pricey, but it'll probably last you forever, and having an M1 chip kind of underscores that this is in the future iPads and not the older ones with the A series chips. But that's just me. What do you think? Which one of these would you go for, or none of the above? Let me know in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching, guys. Let me know if you have any questions, and I'll see you next time right here on the Tech Chat. Oh, and don't forget to get 85% off Surfshark VPN and 3 months extra for free when you use my code TechChat at the checkout. Just click the link in the description to get started.